Hey guys, what's up? It's Nate. And today what we're going to be talking about is earlier this week, I got a phone call from a buddy of mine who works for a financial services company. That financial services company has been sending out email blasts to get people to update credit cards or failed payments. And they were seeing a really, really high bounce rate. And he just wanted to know what my thoughts were on how they might improve that. And I thought, hey, maybe we should turn this into a video because maybe other people have similar thoughts. So in this video, I'll be walking through their current process, what I would potentially do to update that process, make it a little bit more efficient, but also how there are product opportunities within this area as well. And something I think that he should consider and maybe you should consider as well. So stay tuned. So as I said, in this example, my buddy works for a financial services company. That financial services company is sending out basically collection emails. And one thing that they're running into is they have a tremendously high bounce rate, I think 20-25%. So he called me and asked me what I thought they might be able to do. When he and I used to work together, we had built a couple applications. Those applications sent out emails. And we had a couple processes that we would go through to try to optimize the quality of the email data and also to reduce those bounce rates because it's not good. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to map out what their current workflow looks like and then also talk through what I would do to clean up that information, but also build a process around it and also potentially productize the service that you're thinking about as well. So I've got Balsamiq open right now. If you guys aren't familiar with that, it's basically like a wireframing tool that I've used for several years now, just to help kind of illustrate some of the workflow. And then also I'll be taking some notes over here in this section just to keep my thoughts straight and organize some of this as we move through it. So first, financial services company sending out emails for, let's say, expired credit cards. Now, you don't have to get that granular with your use case, but it oftentimes helps me think through it. So basically the way that this works is that they have users. Let's say it's their staff has access to this source system. And that source system is what they're using to basically pull the list, right? So they go in, they probably run a report. That report says, okay, here are the 5,000 people that are, have their credit cards need to be updated. Send an email to them. And on face value, that sounds like a pretty good approach. However, as you might be something you might do, or something that I've done before too, is if you don't necessarily want somebody to be sending you emails, sometimes you give them a different email, or sometimes you give them an email that you don't normally check, or oftentimes people just give out totally fake emails. So, fake@fake.com or no reply at noreply.com. So if that information is sitting inside of your source system, so whether that's a CRM or membership software or your ERP or what have you, and you don't have a regular process for cleaning that information or optimizing that information or checking it, right? When somebody submits an application or somebody fills out something online, and those emails are the ones that are actually attached to the account, that could be very problematic and oftentimes lead to the high bounce rate, right? Because if you're sending an email to a domain that doesn't exist, of course it's not going to go through. So how might we think about doing that a little bit differently? So the first thing that I would think about is if you have a list, right? Let's say you have a list of 5,000 emails. One is just doing some basic cleanup. So for instance, checking for, let's say typos. So if somebody wrote Gmail, but they spelled Gmail wrong. So Gmail, right? They're missing an I. Or if somebody forgot the M off the end of .com, or they spelled .con or .or instead of .org. Now, that could get potentially a little bit tricky, especially now with the rise of domains that end in different abbreviations, right? So there are some organizations that actually do sit at .co. I have a website that is datasmarts.co, not .com. But for the most part, right, those are exceptions, not the norm. So you could build a process that would go through and just do a check for those items, right? Now the question is, okay, well, how do you build that process? Well, it really depends on your skill set, depends on what access you have to resources, because it's all going to be different, right? Some people could build it directly inside a database. Some people could build it inside of an API. Some people need to do it in Excel. Some people could do it in a ETL tool like an Alteryx or an FME, right? It really, really just depends. Now, this particular organization, they do have developers. So if they do have developers, it's more about thinking about the business process and building a system around that service so that you can pull those emails out, clean them, update them if necessary, and then send your expired credit card notifications to the highest quality list you can reasonably come up with, right? So that's what I'm going to talk through right now, is just a couple of those items, and then also how I might think about productizing the service. So let's get into it. So the first thing that we would want to do is, right now, this is a direct line. Source system straight to the email service. So we need to break that up. This cannot be a direct line anymore because there are things that we need to do. So from this source system, right, because the assumption is that they have access to the data. So now we're going to, let's see. I use the recycle sign. I know that it's not the best, but in this software, it's what I found is the closest to like a process. So what might this process be? Well, this process could be any number of things. Let's go ahead and put a couple of the things that I had talked about. So this could be a ETL tool. This could be a database process. This could be spreadsheet process. And what you're looking for, let me grab, I think this one. So what you're looking for is, let's say I have an email address like this, Nate@Gmail. Nate@G. So in these examples, it's pretty clear that, okay, my email address is nate@gmail.com. However, for whatever reason, I did not put that process in, or put that data in correctly. So what we would do is you would build a workflow that is going through and actually reading something like this. So you actually could build either if-then statements, you could do a regex. I mean, we could get into all of that later, but basically what you want to do is you want to, one, check the structure of the email address. You know, there should be some word on one side of an @ symbol, right? Another word or letters, and then a period and some type of ending. So in this one, there's no @ symbol. So this email cannot go through. So what we could do is, if you think about it in a spreadsheet format, is that you could actually have a spreadsheet with different columns, right? And if you wanted to say, okay, well, this one we can fix and we can send, this one we can't fix and we can send, this one we can't fix, don't send, right? So if you think about this, okay, we've got these 3 emails. This one automatically we can't send an email to. Okay, well, it's not the best. I mean, we would obviously like to be able to send an email, but at a minimum, we don't want to send emails that we know are going to bounce, because it doesn't help from our email service provider, or getting your IP address that you're sending from blacklisted. So absolutely something you want to avoid at all costs. So if you think about this, as you start to go through and build your cleaning process, what we used to call it, you start to account for more and more of these iterations, right? Of these different nuanced errors when it comes to emails. So that is one way to do it, right? Another way is to actually use, and there are email service providers that will check, right? So you send them a list of your emails, they will check which ones are valid, which ones are not, and then return a list to you. So that's another way you could do it. That again is a little bit more complicated. If you wanted to build a process around that, you would probably have to build an API call out to that system, send your list, and then handle the return message, update your list. If it's something you're trying to do manually, it's probably not the most realistic. If you're gonna do this manually, the best bet would probably be to use a spreadsheet and go through and create the rules in a spreadsheet, or create the rules in some type of ETL tool, like I was saying, Alteryx, FME are two that I'm very familiar with, or to build it into a database process. So there's a job that basically runs that is checking for these syntax errors and updating the records before an email is being sent. So now that we're talking about how to check for, let's say, bad email addresses, and we start to talk about, okay, well, this is how you update it. Well, think about that from a business process. In this instance, it was a gym owner. So I'm a gym owner. I have 5,000 members, right? You are providing financial services to me. So as part of that financial services, you come across the fact that I have 200 email addresses that are bad, right? So as a business, as a service provider, you could say, hey, Mr. Gym Owner, I just want to let you know that these 200 email addresses are bad. Face value, right? Just give them back a list. Or if you have access to their system, maybe you could go in and automatically update those emails for them. Might that be a service that you could add on? Hey, you know what? As part of our email send service, anything that we find that is a bad email address that we can validate and confirm, update email address, we'll go ahead and we'll update that in your system, right? We'll give you a report at the end of the month, and we'll only charge you $1 a name, $5 a name, right? That would be up to you to find out the value of that update. But that could be something that you could start to include as a product, right? Another way to think about this is on the gym owner side. Oh, wait a minute, I don't want you just going in and updating records. Okay, well, maybe that is a concern. And if it is, how might you be able to set up a process where maybe you, once a month, get with the gym owner, review the updates that are going to be made before you do it, right? That way they're aware. Or could you make the updates and notate the account, right? Email updated from this to that, because what you wouldn't want to do is make a bunch of changes and then those changes nobody knows about, right? So that's obviously something to keep in the back of your mind. But process like this would not only help you provide a better financial service to your client, but also could potentially open the door for additional revenue opportunities, because now you're taking something you need to do anyways, and you're productizing it and then selling it back to your client. And basically it's a win-win. So another thought process here is, okay, well, let's say this client has 500 people that we need to reach out to, right? We can only get good email addresses for 400 of them because of any number of different reasons, right? Maybe the email address is blank. Maybe it's fake@fake.com. Nothing you can do to fix that one, right? So maybe you could set up a process where your first order of business is to clean the addresses that you have, right? You have 500 email addresses or 500 members that came through that need to be reached out to. Of those 500, you feel good about 400 of the emails. So you're gonna send your standard email to those 400 people, right? Email is the cheapest way to reach out to individuals in a bulk process, so it makes a ton of sense. But could you go back to that gym owner and say, hey, for these other 100, why don't we send them a text message, right? Maybe they've already opted into texting. Obviously something you need to check with the individual client on, but could we potentially send out text messages to those 100, could we call those 100? Because what you're doing is you're not saying, hey, we're going to text everybody, because there's a cost to that, right? Not only would you have a cost of sending the text through whatever the services that you're using, but you're obviously going to pass that cost on plus some markup to the client. So now your cost gets exponentially higher. And from a cost per on sending a text versus sending an email, sending a text is significantly more expensive. So you'd want to reduce the universe that you were texting to the greatest extent possible. So could you say, hey, Mr. Gym owner, of the 500 members that we need to reach out to, 400 of them we can send an email to. The other 100 we would like to text or call, right? Now maybe texting or calling as a additional service layer becomes something that you could also productize to your client and say, okay, well, first round, of course, we're always going to try to hit people with emails, but here's a list of 100 emails that are blank, inaccurate, or fake, right? And we can't reach out to them. So what's the value of us reaching out to them via a text message? Let's just say that you charge 25 cents a text message. Well, if 25 cents worth of a text message, right, turns into an updated credit card, which will account for hundreds of dollars of additional revenue that comes in, maybe that's a no-brainer. And maybe that is something that you could start to roll out to your client. Now, just as there's email service providers like MailChimp or Constant Contact, there are also texting service providers that you could build out APIs to. The one that I'm most familiar with is Twilio. But that could also be a way that you could think about not just cleaning emails to reduce your bounce rate, but also productizing the cleaning process and adding layers, right, of touch points. As the universe gets smaller, the cost per is more expensive, right, because it's higher touch, right, or it's more personalized. And I think that in a lot of ways, people would appreciate that and say, okay, well, it's basically a pyramid up, right, with cost increasing as we go up higher, but the universe is going to get smaller. And that could be something that you could show. Okay, well, of the 400 emails that we sent out, we had a 25% conversion rate. Of the 100 texts that we sent, we had a 50% conversion rate. And of the 20 phone calls that we had to make, right, of people that didn't respond to either, we had a 75% conversion rate. And then you could really start to model that out and see what makes the most sense for your organization as a service provider, but also for the client, right? So that's just one way to think about cleaning up the data that you're using to provide your services to not just help out the client, right, and provide a better service, but also potentially create product opportunities for your organization, right? Which at the end of the day, that's really what you want to be doing anyways, right? You're providing more value, and in turn, you are making more money. So if you have any questions about that, you have any questions about Balsamiq, you have any questions about the ETL tools that I mentioned or the services, I'll leave some links in the description. Or if you have any questions about just processes like this in general, just feel free to leave a comment or shoot me an email at nate@natevalentin.com, and we'll catch you guys next time. See ya.